Hey, everybody. Today for you, podcast number 51. And today's podcast is titled Overnight Sensation. Hey, everybody. Welcome to this week's edition of your weekly Limitless Life Network podcast. I'm Dr. Pete Lombardi, and sitting next to me is a special guest. My son Luke is joining me. My wife is out of town. And say hello, everybody.
Hello.
So that's my son Luke. Yeah, Luke's been on the podcast before, and I just dragged him in, and we've been having a great conversation pretty much every moment he's been home, and I'm just really delighted to have him here. But yeah, my wife is still out of town. Sandy is still helping out with the new grandson, and so that's been going really good. But today, I want to thank everybody that's been tuning into the podcast, and I hope that you all like this podcast. I hope you love this podcast because this is a different one. We are totally going off script, off what we normally do. We're going out on a limb. We're actually going to do something we've never done before on the podcast today. And it's either going to be really great or it's not. But I think it's going to be really great. But anyway, thanks for all the great comments. I'm still amazed at some of the people that come up to me and say, "Hey, I listened to your podcast," and I'm like, I'm just so delighted to hear about people sharing and talking about the podcast, and I hope this one gets shared too. I hope this one gets out there to the masses. So be sure to subscribe and like, follow, whatever you got to do technically out there in the interwebs. Okay, so. On with the show. Today's podcast is titled Overnight Sensation. And I don't know if anybody has heard about this that listens to this podcast or not. I know many people have and many people have not, but there is currently in our country a new overnight sensation. And the last week, a farmer, of all people, he's a singer and a songwriter. His name is Oliver Anthony, and he released a song maybe a week ago, maybe not even a week, 6 days, I don't know, called Richmond, North of Richmond. And this was shared with me by a friend of mine. He sent it to me in email, and I didn't really pay much attention to it at first. And then I started seeing it show up in different places, so I listened to it, and I've listened to it several times, and the lyrics are gripping. And, what did you think when you first heard it? Because I played it for you.
Yeah. My initial reaction was just felt it in my heart and kind of made me a little bit sad listening to it. Mm-hmm. But it was kind of more like a reality check.
Yeah.
And it was something that not a lot of people are talking about, but a lot of people know what's going on.
Yeah. And so, we're not trying to, this, again, we're going on a limb today. We're not affiliating with any type of political endeavor here, but that's part of this, this song. And I think one of the things that would be best is if we just kind of describe it a little bit first, and then I want to play it if I can figure out how to do that technically. But it's actually become the number one downloaded song on iTunes. And I just found out recently that I think he's got 5 of his songs that are now in the top 10 on iTunes being downloaded currently. So just in a few days, he went from a nobody and to somebody that's number one as far as songs being downloaded on the internet on iTunes. So it's very cleverly written. The lyrics are very cleverly written, and they address the frustrations of the working class in the United States. And it addresses a lot of social issues. And we're going to talk about some of those issues. And I just want to forewarn you, he does say a couple of curse words in the song, but I think we've all heard them before. So I'm going to play it, and we'll listen to it all the way through. I won't stop it. I'll just play it. It's about 3 minutes long, so hang in there.
I've been selling my soul, working all day, overtime hours for bullshit pay, so I can sit out here and waste my life away, drag back home and drown my troubles away. It's a damn shame what the world's gotten to for people like me, people like you. Wish I could just wake up and it not be true, but it is. Oh, it is living in the new world with an whole soul. These rich men north of Richmond, Lord knows they all just wanna have total control. Wanna know what you think, wanna know what you do, and they don't think you know, but I know that you do. 'Cause your dollar ain't shit, and it's taxed to no end. 'Cause the rich men, north the rich men. I wish politicians would look out for miners, and not just miners on an island somewhere. Lord, we got folks in the street, ain't got nothing to eat, and the obese milking welfare. Well, God, if you're 5'3" and you're 300 pounds, taxes ought not to pay for your bags of fudge rounds. Young men are putting themselves 6 feet in the ground, 'cause all this damn country does is keep on kicking them down. Lord, it's a damn shame what the world's gotten to for people like me, people like you. Wish I could just wake up and it not be true, but it is. Oh, it is living in the new world with an whole soul. These rich men north of Richmond, Lord knows they all just wanna have total control. Wanna know what you think, wanna know what you do, and they don't think you know, but I know that you do. 'Cause your dollar ain't shit, and it's taxed to no end. 'Cause the rich men, north the rich men. I've been selling my soul, working all day, overtime hours for bullshit pay.
All right. So that was the song that we're talking about here, and I want to make sure that the next, that song's not going to play. We wanted to keep playing music here. So I many emotions. I go through many emotions every time I've heard that song so far, and I don't know. Did you feel anything different that time?
No, about the same as the rest.
About the same as the rest. Okay. Well, obviously, he's alluding to rich men north of Richmond, and without saying it, is our politicians, and he's referring to Washington D.C. And I think we all have a bit of, it's one of those jobs, like, nobody wants to be a politician unless you're crazy, like, and you think you can change the world, and then you get into it and you realize, wow, what an uphill battle, right? And so what happens to politicians? I don't believe any politician really gets into it to become corrupt. I don't think that's their goal. Do you?
No, I don't think that's the intention going in. Most people going into politics want to make a change for the better.
Absolutely. I think most everybody, especially at the local level, like, I see that, I've met several of them. I've been to their offices in Albany, New York, and shook their hands and tried to, and have had conversations, lovely conversations with different different people in the Senate and so forth. These are wonderful people, and they get into a game or a business or whatever you want to call it, or a profession, I guess, a profession that is, it's just wild. It's gone wild. When
It's gotten out of hand.
Yeah, you were at a really good analogy you were talking about. You were telling me a story that you heard at school. What was that one that you,
At church?
Yeah, at church. Was it at church?
Yeah, it was
Okay.
at church. So the pastor was talking about the Israelites and how when they went through the Red Sea with Moses, and they got the first 10 commandments, and God gave those to Moses on, I forget which mountain, but they ended up not following those 10 commandments, and so they basically had to leave the place that they were and go to this new place, which was already inhabited by the Canaanites. And so before they went there, God had Moses go back up onto the mountain, and he gave him a new set of rules. But the new set of rules
They weren't the same as
weren't the same as the first ones. Like, he
Right.
could have gone to any one of the first 10 rules and picked out one and been like, yes, do this one, do not murder, do not steal. Like, those are all good ones not to
right.
do.
Sure.
But he didn't do that. He emphasized not involving themselves in Canaanite activities. Don't get in bed with the Canaanites. Don't do the same things that they do, because
They were-
bad company will corrupt good morals.
Yeah.
Was basically
Yeah. So that's what I think I believe is what happens in the political arena, is that after a while, you're there long enough, you end up with being around enough things that you see and how things are done. Eventually, you just start to do some of those things too, and maybe you just kind of explain it away in your own mind.
Yeah, you might not think it's bad at first, but then one thing leads to another, and then all of a sudden things get out of hand.
Yeah, and that happens with not just politics; it happens in any arena, honestly. So that's something to be aware of in your own personal life, and realize that I don't think anybody sets out to just be devious right from day one, or to be evil or wicked. But it happens, and it happens, and people march down this road, and they can get psychotic about it. You can go crazy over it. But and where does that leave us? He talks about in this song the devaluing of the dollar. That we're taxed to no end. The dollar's not worth what it used to be, right? And he says in overtime hours, people just can't get ahead, basically. He calls it BS pay, and then at the end of the day, what does he do? He just goes home, So what can we do to not devalue the dollar anymore? What's in our control? The whole idea of this podcast is limitless life, is to remove limitations. So, this whole mindset, I get it. I get this song, and I really think I've listened to it so many times. It really speaks to your soul. But at the end of the day, what do you do with it? What do you go forward with this song? Or does it just get you emotional and then nothing changes? Because that's unfortunate. It happens so much in our lives, is that we get emotional about something and then nothing changes because we don't do anything differently. So is there anything that somebody can do right now to stop the devaluation of the dollar? Anything you can think of?
Spend cash.
Okay, so why would you spend with cash? Can you explain that? Or
I can explain it.
Okay.
So the reason you want to spend with cash is because, what was the analogy you used?
All right.
If you pay, say, your barber with $50 in cash,
Right.
and then your barber uses that $50 to go buy groceries,
Right.
and then the grocer uses that $50 to go buy, say, lumber.
Right.
After 10 transactions, what is the $50 worth?
Still worth $50.
Okay.
20
No.
transactions, as long as people are handing that $50 bill, it's still $50. It still has $50 worth of value.
Right. Now, take that same scenario and you pay with a card.
Okay.
And so with your card,
The barber gets.
the barber gets
Does he get $50 or she get $50?
98% of that.
Well, he or she may get 98% of that, right?
Right. And where does that other 2% go to?
It goes to the bank fees.
The banks.
Right.
And so every time you pay with cash or the barber pays with card,
Yeah.
the barber goes and pays with the card, and then the grocer goes and pays with the card. And so by the time that money has gone through and been to whatever 2% every time,
Yep.
the value of that $50 is no longer $50.
Right. So that value is lost. It's recaptured by the bank. And so that money is now no longer what it was once worth. And that's a shame, but we don't even realize we're doing it.
Right.
Because that's a habit that we're so into because it's so easy and it's so convenient. And we don't realize how we're selling our souls away by just simple behaviors like that. So that's just one simple thing that you can do is just, do more cash check transactions versus cards. That's just a little tip there. But all this brings people, and what I'm hearing in this song is this emotional state that this gentleman is trying to describe. And I read a little bit of his bio about how there was a point in his life where he was not the poster child by any means because he was, doing drugs and drinking and just feeling horrible about himself because he couldn't get ahead. And he realized he was wasting his life away. And how many people today are getting to that point where they're wasting their life away. And what do people do when they get to that point? What do we call that?
Despair.
Yeah, it's that state of despair. And what do people start to do when they're in a state of despair?
They start looking for outlets.
Yeah. And they close in. They make their world really small and they turn to other things. What kind of things do they turn to?
Drugs, alcohol.
Yeah.
Food, gambling.
Yeah. Pornography. All of these things that we know are not positive behaviors. We know these things are not, making society better and enriching the culture. And the ultimate thing that we're seeing on the rise that nobody likes to talk about is suicide. And he hits on that in this song. Young men putting themselves 6 feet in the ground. It's young men, it's young women, but it's because of this lack of feeling any worth, right? And so people feel like that. What's the point? What's the purpose? What's the point? And that makes me sad. That's the part of this song that really makes me sad is when people are giving up. If you're watching a movie, right, and say it's like Rocky, right? Rocky is fighting for the title. What would you think? I mean, how would the movie end if Rocky's just like, you know what, this training stuff is really hard. And, this guy I fought him before is really close and I got all beat up and my eye's really bad. And you know what? I'm just going to retire, after Rocky 2. He just decides I'm going to retire. There's not going to be any more Rocky 3, Rocky 4, Rocky 5, Rocky 37, whatever, right? So, I mean, that's giving up, right?
Yeah.
How you wouldn't have a blockbuster movie series there.
End of a series.
Yeah, end of the series. So, what happens? When you get to that point of despair, what do you do then? You've got to ask for something. You've got to ask for help. Mm-hmm. I was at I did some grocery shopping. I was going in the store the other day, and I saw a gentleman sitting on the right by the entrance of the store. He literally was just sitting there, and I looked at him, and he didn't look good. He wasn't well groomed. He had some really poor tattoos on his arms. His dentition didn't look like he'd seen a dentist in a while. Not to judge or anything, but this guy was really down on his luck, and he made some eye contact with me, and he stopped me, and he asked me if I could spare, some money to get something to eat. And I said, well, what do you want to eat? And he said, a sandwich. I'd love to have a sandwich. And I said, well, you hang out right there. I'm going to go buy my stuff. I'll pick you up a sandwich. And so on my way out, I stopped and handed him his sandwich, and then I picked him up and asked him a few questions like, what's going on in your life? And he started, basically telling me his hard luck story. His girlfriend's cheating on him, so he left. And so where are you going to stay? And he's like, well, I'm talking to a buddy. When he gets out of work, he'll let me sleep in a tent in his backyard. And and that was it. I said, you got any work coming up? And he's like, well, maybe I'll have some painting jobs. I didn't know what else to say to the guy, honestly. At this point, I was just like, listen, I'm going to pray for you, and I'm going to keep you in my mind and my thoughts, and just try to think of, if I see this guy again, I think I know what I'm going to tell him, and I'm going to tell him that he needs to ask for more than just a sandwich.
Yeah, because he's out there very low in despair, and he's asking for help, which is the right step, but he's not. What help should he be asking for?
Yeah, that's a great question too, because he asked for the bare minimum. He asked for the immediate. What did he need immediately?
He was hungry.
He's hungry, so he's just thinking of short term. He's just thinking of, what do I need right now? And I hear this with people all the time. Like, they come to see me as a chiropractor and they're in pain, and all they want is be out of pain. But that's short term. That's not like really thinking big about your health or thinking in the future. But when your life is miserable, that's all you see is, you see the problem, but you don't see the real problem. You don't see the cause of the problem. You don't see the bigger picture. That's what this guy's trying to paint with this song, is like, there's a lot going on in the world right now. There's a big picture problem going on here. What that guy should have asked for was something like a job or an opportunity, right? Or he could have asked me for a new bike, or he could have asked me for anything. And the worst thing I could have said was no. That's the worst thing I could have said was no. But I would have maybe offered him a sandwich, right? How about a sandwich? You look hungry. Or I could have said, yeah, I have a job for you. I need my house painted. Do you need a place to stay? I've got a spare room. Like, he could have had a job and a place to stay if he was willing to ask. And that's one of the biggest things that we forget to do, is we forget to ask big, because we don't think we're worthy of it. Mm-hmm. We don't think that people are willing to help. We have too many self-doubts. We have all this negative ideas in our head. We have this thing called failed purpose, is that maybe you've asked before and been denied, and so you start believing that that's what's going to happen to you. Because you failed in your purpose or your attempt and your results weren't good, you think that's how it's always going to be. But one thing I've learned is that after the last no comes the first yes.
That's a great quote.
Yeah. So after the last no comes the first yes, and that's what your future depends upon, is the first yes. So, when you're in a state of despair, you need to ask for help, and you need to ask expecting to receive. That was something that I really got out of a service down in Atlanta, was that whole idea of having your hands open, not only to be loose with your finances, to give, but also to receive. And that's we're not taught that. We're not taught that at all. One of the lines in this song is living in a new world with an old soul. What does that mean? Living in a new world with an old soul. What do you think about that?
I think people are raised with old morals, and the world is slowly changing to have multiple truths to confuse people, and a lot of people don't know what is right and wrong anymore.
Do you think they don't know what's right or wrong, or they don't want to know, or they want to make up their own right and wrong?
I think people want to make up their own.
Yeah, it's more convenience that way. But
right.
When I think about living in a new world with an old soul, I think about what would my dad, who was a World War II machine gunner in the South Pacific, think of all the changes that have taken place in the world if he were alive today. And I think that if you went through life gradually, you would just be aware of it. But if you had a period like he's been gone since 2004, so almost 20 years, so 19 years, if you took a 19-year nap like Rumpelstiltskin and you woke up today, you'd be shocked, right? So, but living in a new world with an old soul, I believe that this is where I almost disagree with this guy, because this whole scenario has been going on for centuries in other civilizations, and that is that when a country gets wealthy, it starts to, the power starts to shift, and that's really what this song is also about. Is this power is directed to an elite class, and we're starting to see a separation of the middle class is evaporating, and some of the middle class is escalating toward the elite class, and then you're seeing a majority of the middle class dropping down into the what will be considered the lower class or poverty. And the way and inflation kind of drives that whole situation. So, so it's not anything new, as King Solomon said. There's nothing new under the sun, right?
Right.
So all of the problems that we have today, they've been happening for a long, long time. They're just different scenarios, different faces, different places, different things happening, and they're happening very quickly because of technology today. So that's where faith really comes in, and it's having a bigger purpose. And I think that really brings me to the last, I guess, point. And these haven't been like delineated completely as we talked about this song, because again, this is a totally off the cuff, different podcast. And that is that, this idea and is really hard for us to understand is how do you gather some peace about this whole subject? Because it kind of leaves you feeling a little bit upset and a little bit angry when you listen to these words, and sad and maybe even depressed a little bit, because it's kind of a sad song,
Right.
Let me describe this scenario to you. If you were an infant in the womb and you're fully formed, you have hands and arms and eyes, but your world, all that you know is that infant, it's dark, it's warm, and it's wet. And that's all that you know as far as sensations going on. And you can hear the sound of your mother's heartbeat, and that soothes you, and that's all that you know. But if you were able to communicate with that infant in any way and try to describe what the world is that we live in, what that infant's going to be born into, they would have no perception of what that would mean, right? Because they haven't experienced it. They wouldn't know what a sunset looks like. They wouldn't know what the sunshine looks like. They wouldn't know how snow felt or rain. They wouldn't know, how to smell a flower or anything like that. All these senses, because they haven't been put to use. They wouldn't know what a hug feels like. They wouldn't know, what a high five felt like, right? Or a handshake. So, but yet they would have some proof. There is still some proof that they could lean on. And that is that they have proof that they have hands. What that structure, those hands, they're used for a handshake. They're used for grasping. You have these things right here called your eyes. They're used for seeing things, and it will give you images. And you have these ears that you can hear things, and this nose that you can smell things. And that's what that thing right here is, that mouth that you don't open yet, right? All those things are, and you're going to eat through that mouth, right? So that's the proof that when you're born, you're going to get to use all these parts that God has given you. And then we get into this world and we're looking for something, right? We're always looking for more of this and more of that, more food, more house, more car, more money. And we're chasing this myth of more. And it's created these companies that you were telling me about today that you're learning about.
Like Blackguard and
Vanguard
and BlackRock. That's what they were.
Okay. So, the real estate moguls and all that. So, these companies that just get so big. How do they get so big? Well, it's this myth of more. They have this unquenchable thirst that they're trying to itch, this scratch that they just can't seem to itch because they're trying to get so big but at the end, there's no limit, right? There's no limit to how big something can get. So they're always going to be striving for more and more and more. And it's creating this separation until one day you die. And what did it all mean, right? And that perfect peace comes from knowing that there's a heaven where all of that happens. All of your desires and dreams, they become meaningless because you're at perfect peace.
Yeah, you become satisfied.
You become totally satisfied. And you can even have that peace now, and that's where you can live a life, even this earth, but in your future as a limitless life where you are no longer hurting, you're no longer suffering, that, it's just the love of God. And God loved you so much that he wants you to follow him. So that's my prayer for all of you, is that you develop that relationship with Jesus Christ so that you can have an eternal peace that this world is so longing for. And I believe that, that moral compass will be very easy to follow when you have that perfect peace, for sure. So anything you want to add this podcast, Luke?
I think it's a good one to end on.
Okay, well, good, man. Thanks for sitting in with me. It's way more interesting to have two people than it is to have
back
one.
and forth.
Yeah, a little back and forth. I get to turn my head, you get to turn your head. But that's all we have for this week's edition of your weekly Limitless Life Network podcast. Thank you for tuning in, and be sure to tune in next week as we try to stay connected and be inspired and keep stripping away your limitations so that you can live the life that you were called to live. We'll see you next week.